Hi to everyone who's watching. Today I wanted to film a video about my journey to Islam. It's been about 9 years since I've been Muslim, so it's been a very long road to get to where I am now. And I used to love watching these videos when I was considering becoming Muslim. So I really hope by sharing my experiences I'm able to inspire and help someone along with their journey as well. Becoming Muslim has by far been the best part of my whole life. It encapsulates every single part of my daily life, and I couldn't imagine now where I'd be at if it weren't for Islam. It's insane to even imagine. So a little bit about myself. I was born in London and was raised here, but my mom is American. All of my family on that side are pretty much Christian, specifically Catholic, Protestant, but not religious too much. And then my dad was born in the UK, but he is of Turkish Cypriot heritage. So on that side of my family, everyone's pretty much Muslim, but just not practicing at all. In fact, Cyprus, where my dad's from, the north part of Cyprus, is known as one of the most secular Muslim societies in the whole world. Most people there drink alcohol, no one really prays, at least consistently. Very few people fast during the month of Ramadan. So that's kind of his cultural background, but because he grew up in the UK and he had an English stepdad, he also had several religious influences. And then on top of all of that, I grew up just with my mum. My dad had moved to the Middle East when I was a child. So yeah, very secular environment. And I went to a mixed school in London. My childhood years were pretty normal, I'd say. I didn't get into that much trouble. I was quite shy. I used to study quite a lot as well. But then when I got around the age of like 15, 16, I started becoming a little bit more popular at school. And that's when my lifestyle changed quite a bit. I started dressing differently. I always just felt that it was something that you had to put up with, people making comments, or specifically men making comments every time you'd go out. And as a young girl, it was just so horrible. I remember having my skin crawl every single time a man would whistle or make a comment. But looking back, the clothes that I was wearing, first of all, made me look a lot older, but secondly, they were so provocative that you are giving out this image that you almost want to be sexualized. And on top of that, I was starting to go out more. I had a very large mixed friend group. Even though I was probably a lot more reserved than most people of my age in that group, I was still doing a lot of things that even back then I didn't really feel that comfortable with. During that time, I didn't really care too much about religion. I always believed in God, but it seemed like something that was very abstract, and I kind of just compartmentalized it to something purely based on belief and that no action was required. I used to go to church a little bit when I was young with my grandfather, who's English, step-grandfather. I just struggled quite a lot with the teachings and being at church. I just felt like I was always so impatient. I could never sit and listen, and nothing connected with me whatsoever. I felt that the services to me were like a very indirect relationship with God, and I couldn't quite get to God through the way that I was taught to practice religion. And then I also had issues with particular concepts like the concept of the Trinity, the role of Jesus, but also I always felt that there was a sense of indirectness in how I was engaging with my religion. I felt like I was never really speaking to God directly. It was always through some kind of intermediary. And even in prayer, I felt that it was always so formal, and I was never able to really feel much. So I just kind of put that to the back of my mind, didn't really think about religion. I used to just dread going to church, and that was it. I was fine living my life. I was always quite interested in Islam from a young age. My grandma, who is from a Muslim background, used to teach me and my brother a little bit about Islam, and I always found it really interesting. And whenever I'd hear someone saying something bad about Muslims or Islam, I'd always be wanting to defend the religion. And yeah, it felt like something that was great, but that just wasn't for me. It wasn't part of the life that I envisioned for myself. Then fast forward a few years later, so when I'm 18, I start university, my undergrad degree. Even though I barely went out during my university years, I still was in scenarios that I don't think were very befitting. And this is when for the first time I was around a lot of Muslims, like practicing Muslims, because I'd taken Arabic as one of my courses. At that point, I used to get so riled up by seeing girls in headscarves. And there were a lot of hijabi girls on our course. I was one of the few who didn't wear anything. And I just felt like this was something that was very oppressive. I felt that they were girls who were not able to think freely, and I felt quite sorry for them, in all honesty. And then this was also at a time like around 2013, 2014, when there were a lot of people going off to Syria to fight with ISIS, and I was following politics quite closely at that time, and I was just so sickened by everything that I was seeing unravel. And obviously, you know, looking back now, it was a really, really horrible, brutal period. But back then I used to get so riled up, and I used to get myself involved in all sorts of debates on Facebook. Whenever I'd see someone post something that was like anti-UK government, I'd be the first to comment like crazy, start an argument. I'd private message girls who I felt were sharing things that were a bit even like in a grey area, not so black and white. There was another example when one of the boys in my class who was English, like fully English, ended up converting to Islam, and I actually sent him this long message on Facebook. I apologized years later, but I sent him this long message on Facebook pretty much just saying, why did you feel the need to convert? What did you hope to find in Islam that you couldn't find in your own religion and Christianity? And yeah, it was pretty belittling, but that's kind of the feelings I had back then. Even though on one hand I was part of a lot of Islamic societies and stuff like that, I still had a lot of prejudice and resentment for some reason. So I'd say that whole period, even though I was taking Islamic studies as courses and stuff like that, I was very combative with my stance on Muslims. Anything that I felt was too extreme, I would write about. I was just very confrontational with. I was okay with someone being Muslim, but as long as they were very Western and they really were a part of, you know, the UK's values, then it was fine. But anything above that, I just couldn't stand. So that was my experience during my undergraduate degree. And then when I got to around 2021, I did my master's at uni in London, and that's when everything changed. By this point, I kind of still had my views from my undergrad degree, but they had softened a little bit. And then I'd studied international history. And for some reason, I had taken a lot of courses again on like Islamic history. And then one particular course that I took was called Political Islam. So it was about the roots of Islamic extremism. And one of the things that we covered was the rise of ISIS, which was something that, again, I'd always get very riled up about. And one of the essays we had to write was about whether ISIS could be considered an Islamic state or not. And of course, my own stance from the outset was, yeah, of course it's an Islamic state. We can't sugarcoat it. You know, we can't sugarcoat what Sharia law is. We can't sugarcoat what all of these things are. The brutality, the killings, that is what an Islamic state is. So as I was researching my essay, and that was a lot more pure theology, and I started catching myself off guard a little bit. I was getting more and more surprised by what I was reading. One of the things that I focused on was social justice in Islam. And I remember thinking, oh, you know, that's actually quite impressive what an Islamic state envisions. And I suddenly started thinking, okay, like Islam as a religion, it is really making sense to me. I'm understanding it a lot better. And I can almost now understand why people convert to this religion. But it just felt like something I would never do myself. Like, it was great for other people, but it wasn't something I wanted as part of my life. But one of the trips that I took to Cyprus, I used to go to Cyprus quite a lot, like every year, and see my dad there. And we have this small house in a village that's right overlooking a mosque. My grandfather actually used to teach at that mosque. From the balcony of our house, you can see, when the doors are open, the very few people who go there to pray, but you can see them praying. One night I heard the call to prayer, as I always did when I was there. I just thought, you know, let me go up on the balcony and see what's happening. This is probably what changed everything for me. As I was on the balcony, I saw you know, these men praying, and they were in prostration, and I at that point wasn't really like a strong believer, I'd say, in any way. I kind of talked to God sometimes here and there. In that moment, I prayed and I said, God, please let me have that one day. I want to be able to pray like that. And I was crying. It just seemed like this thing in front of me, these people praying, was so unachievable for me. It was something that was so far removed that it just felt impossible, like it was a completely different life that I'd never had, but I so wanted to be a part of and to experience. After that moment, I realized that religion was starting to weigh a lot more heavily on me. All the videos I was watching were to do with Islamic theology and like debates and speakers corner and stuff, and people's stories to conversion. And so I decided, okay, maybe this is something that I want for myself. Maybe I do want to be Muslim, but how is this going to happen? How is my family going to really accept this? Not just being Muslim, but being practicing. Am I going to start to have to wear a headscarf? How is my life going to change? And I felt really afraid of that. And I spoke to a few people at the time who I trusted, and it was clear that this was something that was important for me to do. So I took my Shahada one night. I think it was actually on Christmas Eve, or like a night before Christmas Eve. And it was such a special, intimate moment. I was so emotional, and it just felt like the best feeling to know that this is exactly where I was supposed to be. This was exactly what was planned for me. And that everything that I'd been through up to that point had led me exactly to this, to becoming Muslim. And I still get emotional thinking about it now, because there were so many signs in my whole childhood that led me up to that point. So after I took my Shahada, I decided that I wouldn't tell anyone, straight away at least. I wanted just to be really gradual in how I was going to go about changing things. I just wanted to figure out what I'd start with first. It seemed so overwhelming. I was living with my mum and my brother at the time, and I thought I'd just keep it a little bit quiet and not tell any of my friends. I told a few of my Muslim friends, but that was it. One of the things that I knew I wanted to really focus on was prayer. At that point I could read and write in Arabic, but I couldn't really understand loads. But I thought prayer is the main entryway into this, so that's what I wanted to focus on. That was actually a really, really difficult challenge, because even though I was able to recite the prayers and learn them quite quickly because I could read and write in Arabic, I just couldn't connect with God, I felt, anymore. Everything suddenly changed, and whereas before I was having these really personal, like intimate conversations with God, just, you know, in my head, nothing crazy, I suddenly felt that because there was something so formal now with very specific ways you have to pray and the particular movements and the particular words, I lost all that connection. So that was quite a difficult time. I was so focused on the words and the actions and movements that it kind of stripped the spiritual aspect from the prayers. And thankfully I ended up regaining that later down the line, but it did take a while for that to happen. I knew of a lot of people at the time who had converted to Islam, and they'd rushed so much into things. It was so crazy all at once, and obviously with good intent, but it just meant that they ended up backtracking quite quickly after that because it was just too much too soon. Finally, I decided to tell my mum and my brother. I was so nervous. I actually wrote a letter to my mum to explain to her that I had become Muslim, and she was really concerned when I said I had a letter to show her. But when she actually read it, she was really, really supportive, and I'm so grateful to have had a mum, or to have a mum, who accepted me in such a supportive way. My brother was the same. I think they were both a little bit nervous again, because at the time there was a lot of stuff on the news about people converting and then going off to ISIS, to Syria and Iraq and stuff. So there was that concern, but because they knew my temperament, I don't think it was a massive worry. It was interesting because even though I was nervous to tell my mum and my brother, I wasn't so nervous, which is ironic considering, like, my mum specifically is not from a Muslim background, she's Christian. But it was my dad that I was really nervous about, because especially in Cyprus, anything that's religious can be perceived in quite a political way. So I didn't know how he'd react to it, but he was also really supportive. My modesty journey has also been quite a long one. I started dressing modestly even before I became Muslim, kind of like during my master's degree, I just decided I wanted to cover my body. I was sick of people objectifying me and sexualizing me, so I started wearing very loose clothing, but my hair was always on show. It was really difficult when I finally did decide to cover my hair, but I'll probably make another video just about that alone, because I actually kept that quiet from my family for a whole another year. It took me a long time to get to the point where I felt comfortable practicing in front of people, and I think I still even now feel a little bit awkward sometimes if it comes to like me having to pray and stuff like that. But everyone around me has been really supportive. But yeah, that's pretty much it for how I became Muslim. If there's anyone who wants me to do a longer form video on specific elements, I think I'll probably do something about dressing more modestly and covering my hair at one point. But there's so many different compartments that I could analyze, so I'm not sure what would be like most helpful to people. But yeah, I just have to say that it's insane to think what my life would be like now without Islam, and I can never forget about what a privilege and blessing it has been to be given this opportunity in my life. And even though there's still a lot of things that I want to implement into my lifestyle and do better at, it's just been the best thing that could ever happen to me. That's it for this video. I hope it has helped someone out there. Thank you for watching.
My beloved brothers and sisters, many people around us are searching for peace, purpose and truth. As Muslims, we have a responsibility to represent Islam through our words and actions. When we treat non-Muslims with kindness, honesty and respect, we show them the beautiful character that Islam encourages. Good manners can open hearts and create opportunities for meaningful conversations. Da'wah does not always require a speech or a lecture. Sometimes it is as simple as helping a neighbor, being patient with a co-worker, or showing compassion to someone who is struggling. These acts of kindness can leave a lasting impression and may inspire others to learn more about Islam and its teachings. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was a mercy to mankind. He showed kindness to people from all walks of life and invited them to Islam with wisdom and gentleness. His character was one of the reasons many people embraced Islam. By following his example, we can become a source of guidance and goodness for those around us. Always remember that guidance is in the hands of Allah. Our role is to share the truth with sincerity and to treat others with the best character. Even if you do not see immediate results, your kindness may plant a seed that grows later. If someone comes closer to Islam because of your actions, Allah can reward you greatly for every effort made sincerely for His sake.